Hiya, I'm Marcus from All Ages Airsoft. Today we've got something a little bit different. We've got a John Wick 2 rifle that we are putting a Gate Titan 2 with pulsar engine in. So I've removed the gearbox and stripped everything bar the bearings out of the gearbox. The reason I've left the bearings in there, double bell gearboxes, the material's quite soft and you can damage the gearbox, twist it by trying to knock them out, and there's no point, we don't use them, so we have no issue. The only other thing I've had to do is there's a little round threaded part here. We've taken the top of that off and made it flush with the inside of the gearbox, just purely because the Gate Titan 2 circuit board doesn't have the hole big enough for that, and that's where the securing screw sits in. So the first thing we're going to do is just pop the gearbox shell circuit board in. We're going to get our little screw. They do supply it with two. On the double bells and a lot of the other gearboxes, they use the the smallest screw. You've got a little metal washer that goes on first, and then a mylar or insulating washer. That is really, really important. That will stop it shorting out against the gearbox. And we're just going to pop that in and just do it up reasonably tight. It doesn't have to be massively tight. Wiring on this one, I'm not really that concerned about because there are no gears or anything important in it. So we can just run the wires like so, like that. That's more than adequate. This wire is for the actual HP8 engine, and this is the fabled Gate Pulsar. So first things we're going to do is just screw that in. Make sure you don't get it cross-threaded because that becomes an issue. There we go. Should thread in nicely. It's got an O-ring on there, so one thing you do need to remember, just use a pair of pliers and just nip it up. There you go, that's it, done. And then that will fit in there like that. It doesn't really matter which orientation it sits, really doesn't. Then this little connection will plug into the 2-pin solenoid connection here. The little aligning mark on the top will sit into this little groove. I don't know if you can see it just in there, like so. That's it. Now, I personally have the tube like that. At that stage, we'll pop the, hang on, before I forget, might need the top of the circuit board and the trigger that we're going to use. And the customer wants this blue trigger that's actually out of a Leviathan, a Jeftron Leviathan. So I'm going to put the trigger spring in. Just pop him on. There we go, like so. Get the spring in the place, knock that in. There we go. Then the circuit board can go on. Make sure you get all the connections in before you press it in. Make sure none of the wiring is going to get crimped anywhere. That's very important. That I'll deal with in a minute. And then you just pop the gearbox shell on. And then now I haven't got much play on that trigger, which suggests to me that this trigger has been adjusted, and it has. Right, so I'm going to pull that off very carefully, and I'm going to take all the adjustment off of that trigger. They are an insanely small Allen key. And sometimes you cannot undo them. Sometimes you just got to use a pair of pliers. We can actually set the trigger sensitivity in the gate control unit. The Titan 2 is Bluetooth, which makes life a lot easier. So I'm actually going to remove that for now. So there we go. Right, pop that little thing back in. Got plenty of movement there. Again, make sure your wire's where we want it. Put the circuit board back on very carefully. Right. Make sure none of the wires are crimped. You can see a lot inside here as well. And trigger moves. Right. Now we can just pop the screws back in. Okay. Technically for this, you don't need to put all the screws back in. I always do because why wouldn't you? It doesn't do it any harm whatsoever not to, and it will stop weird problems arising. You can also get this this system in front wired for some of the shorter weapon systems that require front wired batteries. But on this occasion, we've got a gun with a huge stock, so it isn't a problem. Now, you might be asking, well, what about the how are you going to fit the stock to this gun? Because if you notice, some systems have a little aluminium block with a hole through it that is for these your stock screw. This hasn't got it. So what we will be using here is the standard spring guide. Plenty of room in there. We don't need it for anything other than that. It is a little bit tricky to fit, but we will be going into that later on. Right, now that is the basics of the system together. Next thing we need to do is the selector. You still need to use it. So we are going to put one of the selector screws in. Now you've got complete white with a small amount of black and white with a larger amount of black. That's all tunable to your individual weapon system. I normally start with the middle one, and you're meant to have the black line in line with the back edge of the selector plate like that. If you have problems with your selector, it not activating full auto or not going into safe, you might need to consider changing that sticker for one of the other versions. And that just sits on there like that. That is the basics of the system. So now we are going to we'll pop that in afterwards because we'll have that option. Hiya, I'm Marcus from All Ages Airsoft, and today we're doing another part to the HPA John Wick 2 rifle. Right, we've since found a problem. I fitted it all, put it in the gearbox, calibrated the selector, no problems whatsoever. But for some unknown reason, it did not like this blue Leviathan anodized trigger. It wouldn't calibrate with it. So we've tried using black marker pen on all the surfaces. Didn't want to know at all. So we've since fitted a generic black trigger and that calibrates without a problem. So what we're going to do now is just get this thing all back together and in the gun and tested. So all I'm going to do is, you don't really need to do these gearbox screws up massively tight. Fortunately, it's just essentially the shell to hold the HPA system. So like that. So in theory, once we get this in the weapon, the only thing we need to really set is the firing rate, but probably more importantly, the dwell, which on these, if I remember correctly, is not that difficult because it's Bluetooth. And quite a nifty little system. Now these have got a bolt catch on them, which is great. So we're gonna pop that back on, just so you can fit the, have access, easy access to the, your hop unit. Gonna kill it for a second. Right, so I'm gonna pop the screw in there. And this is the bolt catch mechanism, which sits essentially like that. Very tricky, these ones. A real pain in the butt. No. There we go. Hold that in. Sometimes this stuff is exceptionally fiddly. Sometimes it goes in like an absolute dream. There we go. Again, this part you don't want massively tight. You want that to be able to move. If you do it up too tight, it can lock it up entirely. Right, selector. As we've discussed, we've already put the sticker in and I've managed to calibrate that without a problem, so we're not worried about that. We're going to pop the wiring in, pop your hose in. And there it sits. Pop our... That's what I was a little bit afraid of. I can just see the wiring. So all I've done is get my tool in there, find the top of the wiring, get it over it, pull it down out of the way. Nothing too substantial. I'm just going to use one of my pin punches just to knock that in. flush. Then that can pop in. Your rear takedown pin. Like so. There we go. Right. Now what we're going to do now is put the cap on, which sits like that. Now the problem we've got now is this has got to sit in now so the stock screw can go in. Now the problem we're going to have, this is when it starts getting a little bit fiddly. So I'm going to get all the bits and pieces I need in front of me. So I'm going to pop that on. I like to pre-bend the wires a little bit, make my life just a tad easier. I undo that again to stop any issues, and I'll show you how I adjust that in a minute. Pop that on. Now I'm going to pop this in position. Twist it so it would lock in, because of course ordinarily this would be under spring tension. Pop that in. Then this is where it starts getting quite interesting. And use my long screwdriver. And start screwing it in, but you've got to hold the spring guide in position at the same time. You can just feel it. There we go, we've nipped it up. Right, then I'll screw the castle nut down, back the screw off about half a turn, tighten up the castle nut, and then screw the stock nut up, and that's that section completely finished, done, dusted. We don't need to worry about it. Right, next piece, grip, which is there. Now whether or not, no it won't. Right, I'm going to take that off, pop the grip on, and I'm going to put in the grip screws. These come with, I think it's 2 grip screws if I remember correctly. This I'm going to try and remove in a minute and see, because I'd like that pipe slightly more supported than it is at the moment. Oh, still in there. Quite weird that the gearbox itself has got 4 holes for the grip screws, and the grip has got 4 grip screws, but yet they only ever put 2 in. go. Right, now, this I want to have a look at. I'd like to be able to use that. So we're just going to see. That is actually quite a nice little system. So we can remove that. Pop that through there. What I might end up doing is putting a little bit of heat shrink over that, just to give it a little bit of support and stop it from chafing. If you can at all solve a problem by putting 50p's worth of material in, why wouldn't you want to? Right, so that is that for the minute. Right, what we're going to do now is just test the basic system. So we will be back in a minute where we will power it up and test it. Right, okay then. Here we are. We have a 48 centilitre bottle with an air tap regulator. Regulator set at about 70 psi. Doesn't matter too much for this because we're just testing it. So we're gonna pop on a battery, just a 7.4. This is a 1500 PEQ battery. All right, we're gonna connect that, and we are going to connect that, and I now need to adjust this regulator. I do. Right, so here we go. Right, that's interesting. Right, I might need to, when I work out, there it is, we are just going to go into this system. Right, right, selector. That's why it's only seeing right. There we go. I have to now come out of the system. Right, okay, finally sorted it. Found the settings we needed to find on the system. So, single shot. Oh, hang on. Pop it into shooting mode. And this is 50 rounds a second. Now, just to scare people, that's how fast you can go. So what we're going to do, we are going to drop that down to what the customer wants at the moment, which is 50 rounds a second. Almost sounds like a warthog. Right, so now what we need to do fully reassemble the gun, which I won't bore you through, you know all of that. And then we're going to do some testing downstairs. See you in a bit. Hiya, I'm Marcus from All Ages Airsoft, and we have now got to the testing of the John Wick 2 rifle that has now been fitted with a Gate Titan 2 with pulsar engine. We've also fitted it with the Well Pro electric 1600 round drum mag, which at this stage I'm highly impressed with. And because we're sick, warped, twisted individuals, we've done something a bit, some people would say stupid. I'm just trying to push the boundaries, and yeah, this is set for, I'm going to give it a burst and then you can try and guess. For those of you who can't figure it out, that's 100 rounds a second. That is absolutely insane. I've never managed to get one of these to operate at 100 rounds a second before. I've had them reliably feeding with a PTS e.1 mag at 90 rounds a second, but I've never ever managed to get 100. This drum mag is insane. It just keeps feeding. And it is so easy to change the settings. All you have to do is go into the gate control system, and we can set the rate of fire from 1 round a second all the way up to 100 rounds a second. I'm not saying that 100 rounds a second is acceptable for a game, but it's awesome to play with. I would personally have this set at about maximum 40 rounds a second, but my God, what a piece of kit, honestly.